Well, welcome back. This is the third video in our Hire Smart series. So we've talked about one, always be recruiting. Develop kind of a hit list of people that you want to make sure somewhere, somehow, someday are going to come to work for you and with you in that organization. Make sure that everyone in your organization is always thinking about who could we get to join us. 2, hire for competencies. 3, become the kind of place where the kind of people you want to hire want to work. 4, be the kind of leader or manager or supervisor that high performers want to work with. Remember this? Players win games. Coaches win players. That's your job. Here's the 5th thing we've talked about so far. Interview and select based upon the competency-based discussions with references. This is crucial. And here's the 6th idea we've covered so far. Take your time. Rushed hires rarely work out. They do once in a while, but it's kind of rare. So now that you've hired the best candidate, time for reality to set in. You know how it works? When we select somebody from a group of people that we want to hire, we select the very best person, and they know they were the best, and we tell them they were the best, and then the moment they walk across the threshold into our organization, they go clear to the bottom. They're now the worst. They are the newest person. They don't know what works. They don't know what doesn't work. They don't know their head from a high rock. They came in with competencies, but they don't know anything about the organization. So it's kind of a little bit of a roller coaster ride for that person. So be aware of that dynamic, and the approach that I'm going to share with you to onboarding will help deal with that dynamic. It will also, if you follow this approach, will help avoid that person stumbling into some mistakes that they'll have to work for weeks or months to uncover or to recover from. So we've learned to use what we call a 3-stage onboarding process. We think of this onboarding process as apart from the technical training that a job requires. And this is a crucial step in the hiring process. It's all about immersion in the structure, the history, the culture, and the relationships and the interconnection of those relationships in your enterprise. It's all about getting the new hire to soak up the reality of working in your organization. All that stuff, you know, that you really can't write about, that you might not even think about writing about. This onboarding approach gives the new hire all the perspectives that they are going to need to succeed as a part of your team. So we've used this approach for decades, and we recommend it, and dozens of other organizations have used it. It works. So again, this is not the technical training part of that job. If you're hiring for a technical position and the person does not have direct experience in that part of the job, you've probably already got a pretty decent training program for him or her. If not, make sure you put that in place before they start. This onboarding process happens simultaneously with whatever sort of technical training might be needed. And the objective of this immersive onboarding approach is to, well, immerse someone in your culture to make visible the invisible parts of working with you. We use a 3-stage approach, and I'm going to illustrate this approach by describing each phase as 1 month long, but you can lengthen or shorten the time in each of these stages depending upon the sophistication of your enterprise, depending upon the scope of the responsibilities that the new person will have, and depending upon the complexity of the job itself. Now here we're going to have a graph up here that will help describe how we think about how to figure out how long this process should be. We call this the compliance judgment model. And imagine that a person on one side of this graph is in a job that is mostly compliance. That means that their job is mostly about understanding the rules and following the rules, or understanding processes and following the processes. It's mostly laid out for them. They do a bunch of tasks in the right order, in the right way, and they need to do them over and over and over. That's a compliance-based job. Just comply with the rules and the processes. Now, as you move over to the middle of that graph, a person might be in a job that is partly compliance and partly judgment, and move clear over to this side of the graph, and they're going to be in a job that requires mostly judgment. They need to really think about the future, make a lot of connections. So a person who is in a compliance side of a job will need a shorter period of time to be immersed in the organization, and they'll need more technical training. If a person is drifting over to the other side of this approach or this graph, they're in a judgment-oriented job, they're going to need a lot more orientation and a lot more immersion in this onboarding process and less training, so to speak. So figure out which way. What do you need from a person? Do you need somebody to have really good ideas and good judgment and implement those ideas well? Well, then they're on the judgment side. If you need somebody to just get a bunch of stuff done the way it's supposed to be done over and over, well, then they're on the compliance side of that graph, all right? So the job that requires a lot of compliance with a bunch of set rules and the accomplishment of a bunch of set tasks obviously needs a shorter onboarding process, but a longer training process. But the person that is in a job that requires a lot of judgment, and it requires a lot of thought and connection in that side of it, and a lot less compliance, getting tasks done, they're going to require a lot longer boarding immersion process and less training. So an illustration of that might be if you have somebody you're hiring is going to take calls and maybe place orders or follow a script, that's a high compliance side. That's a person who needs a less amount of time to be onboarded and immersed in the culture. They still need time, but less. A person who is like, I don't know, a vice president of strategic development or something like that. You put them into that kind of position or something like that, right? They're going to need a lot more time to be onboarded. Somebody who is a salesman in an organization selling a specific kind of product, probably a little more to the compliance side. Somebody who is developing investor relationships that are long-term relationships, probably over here on the judgment side, all right? A lot more time spent in that kind of job, immersing them in the organization, all right? High compliance, shorter onboarding. Low compliance or high judgment, longer onboarding. You get the idea, all right? You decide how long it needs to be, all right? So let's imagine somebody's kind of in the middle or maybe over to this side over here to the side that is mostly judgment. And we're going to look at an onboarding process that has 3 stages. And I'll just illustrate again like it's 3 months. Stage 1, month 1. You're going to bring this person in and set them down and tell them in month 1, I want you to learn everything you can about this organization. I don't want you to make any decisions. I don't want you to get anything done, so to speak, task-wise. I just want you to immerse yourself in the organization and learn as much as you can. And before that person gets there, before you've hired that person, I want you to create a long list of things that that person needs to learn and who they need to talk with to learn about them or where they need to go to find those resources. Then let them know that you're going to expect them to interview a bunch of people in the organization and not in any way tell them what you think they ought to do. You're just going to have that person go out and interview and soak it up and soak it up and soak it up. And here's all the stuff that I want you to be able to discover and learn. Here are the people and here are the resources to learn that. You got a month? Go. Check back with me a lot so I know how your progress is going. Then here's the key. At the end of that, say, month, you're going to have that person pass an oral exam. What I mean by that is, and tell them this up front, that they're going to come in and sit down with you and maybe 2 other people, maybe 3 other people, and we're going to interview that new candidate to find out if they've learned all of these connections that they're supposed to learn. What's the history? Who was our first this? Who was our second that? Where did we get this technology? Why is this value more important than that value? All the things that you ask them to learn, you're now going to have them present that knowledge to you, and you're going to expect them to pass the oral board exam. I mean, really treat it like that. Tell them it's like that. It's very important. Without that, they won't go deeply, and they probably will not take it as seriously. Neither will the people who they're interviewing take it very seriously. This is very, very, very important. Oh, but we got so much stuff that has to be done. That's why we hired this person. All this stuff is backing up. Do not turn them loose on getting a bunch of that stuff done until they have successfully passed this oral board exam and passed stage 2. This is very, very, very important. You're going to want to get them to work right away, so to speak, but don't. Take that first month, by illustration, to immerse them in the organization following your requests. All right. That then, if they pass this oral board exam, then that moves them to stage 2. If they don't, have them go back out, take another week, and learn some more stuff. But all right, let's assume they've passed it, they've learned everything you wanted them to learn, and they can say it without referring to a bunch of documents. Okay, this is a big deal. Move them into stage 2. This is month 2 in this illustration. You're going to say to them, given what you've learned, and now I want you to go out and make a plan for the next year, and I want you to go deeper into the learning stage to make a plan for what you and your scope of responsibility needs to do over the next year. Come back in the next and go deep on this stuff and make all kinds of connections and make sure you come back with a very, very good plan. That might take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, something like that. We'll see. It might take a month. Then at the end, we want you to come back and present the plan. Now, maybe the plan will be presented to you and a couple of other people. That's the best way to do it, people who would most likely be affected by the plan. And you're going to look for quality of the plan. Not that the person is going to make a bunch of good decisions based upon it, but that they made the plan based upon their understanding now of the organization gained in step 1, in that immersion phase. That's step 2. At the end of presenting that plan, you're now going to move them in. If they presented a good plan that didn't need much more work, you're now going to move them into stage 3. Careful, you're still going to hold back on the reins because you want to gallop off into the future, but don't do it. Stage 3, you're going to ask that person to pick part of the plan that they created, the first part of the plan, the most leveraged part of the plan, and to begin implementing just that part of the plan, focusing on getting buy-in and engagement from the team of people around them. Don't do anything else but to begin to work on that plan. Bring back to them at the end of, bring back to you then at the end of that 3rd month, the progress that they've made so far in that month on the implementation of that one part of the plan. By the time you get to that place, this person will have, in this illustration, gone through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, or 3 months in this illustration, and they will be utterly, utterly immersed in the organization. If you do this and you resist the temptation to keep piling work, so to speak, on the plate of that person before they're completely immersed, if you can resist that temptation, you will have so oriented that person to the depth and sophistication and the inside stories of your organization. You will have so immersed them in how the structure works and who knows what and where it's kept and what all the relationships are like, that they will be worlds ahead. They will, when it's done well, they'll often know things that other people they work with don't know. This is going to be a very, very valuable approach, but it will require discipline and patience on your part, especially because you may not have hired a person until a year after you needed a person in that position. So now you feel just pressure. If you don't do this and just throw them in and give them a bunch of stuff to do, you will set them up to fail. They may not leave, but they will probably leave a wreck behind them everywhere they go and make things harder than they need to be. And then it'll take a month or weeks, years, who knows, to clean up the mess that was made in that first time. They'll think they were hired to come in and change things, and they're only hired to come in and improve some things, not everything. All right, there we go. I know. You want to just throw the newbie into the deep end of the pool and toss them a couple of bowling balls and say, get to work, right? But don't. You're going to set them up to fail. Pump the brakes, immerse the new hire in the workplace first. Don't set them up and their team up to fail. This approach works. Customize it, make it your own. We know hiring is hard, but don't make hiring harder than it needs to be. In our next video in this series, which is the last video in this series, it's all about avoiding some common mistakes that you and I make when hiring people. You may have made a few of those mistakes. You may have made a lot of those mistakes. So you might want to watch the next video by yourself in a dark room with some Kleenex. Here's to you. Cheers.